Mohamed Farrah Aidid was born in 1934 in the Mudug region of central Somalia, in the town of Galkacyo, during the Italian colonial period. He hailed from the Habar Gidir subclan of the Hawiye, one of Somalia's major clan families. Like many in his generation, Mohammed's early life was shaped by colonial rule, resistance movements, and the struggle for Somali independence. His father was a respected elder, and Aidid grew up with a strong sense of discipline and ambition. Aidid's early education began in the traditional Dugsi system, where he memorized the Quran, but his academic ambitions would take him far beyond Somalia. After completing his initial schooling, he joined the Somali National Army after independence in 1960. He was soon selected for advanced military training in Italy and the Soviet Union, which were training grounds for many of Somalia's future military elite. Aidid studied at the Frunze Military Academy in Moscow, one of the top military institutions of the Eastern Bloc. His training gave him both ideological exposure to Marxism-Leninism and sophisticated military strategy, which would shape his thinking for decades to come. Aidid rose quickly through the ranks of the Somali armed forces during the 1960s and 1970s, becoming one of the most prominent officers under the regime of General Mohamed Siad Barre, who took power in a 1969 coup. Aidid served in various key military and administrative positions. Most notably, he became the Somali ambassador to India, which further enhanced his diplomatic and political experience. Despite his loyalty to the regime early on, Aidid's growing ambition and independent thinking soon put him at odds with President Siad Barre. He was viewed with suspicion by the Barre regime, which was notorious for purging those seen as threats. In the early 1980s, Aidid was arrested and imprisoned without trial, spending nearly 6 years in jail. This period marked a turning point in his life. When he emerged from prison in the mid-1880s, he was determined to play a leading role in the opposition to Barre. By the late 1980s, Somalia was in deep crisis. Siad Barre's regime had become increasingly authoritarian, and various armed opposition groups were emerging across the country. Among these was the United Somali Congress, USC, a Hawiye-dominated rebel group formed in 1989. Aidid joined the USC and soon became its military leader, using his training and strategic mind to lead the resistance against Barre's forces. In 1991, after intense fighting and with the support of other rebel groups such as the Somali National Movement (SNM) in the north, Aidid and the USC succeeded in toppling Siad Barre, who fled Mogadishu. It was a historic moment. Barre's 21-year dictatorship had ended. However, rather than uniting to rebuild Somalia, the rebel factions turned against each other in a bitter struggle for power. After Barre's ouster, a major conflict broke out between Mohamed Farrah Aidid and his USC rival, Ali Mahdi Mohammed. Both men claimed leadership of the newly liberated Somalia. Ali Mahdi was declared interim president at a conference in Djibouti, but Aidid refused to recognize his authority. What followed was a devastating civil war in Mogadishu between the two factions. The capital was divided into territories controlled by each leader, and brutal street-to-street fighting resulted in tens of thousands of civilian deaths. Between 1991 and 1992, Somalia descended into chaos. Government institutions collapsed, famine gripped the countryside, and warlords carved out fiefdoms across the nation. Aidid, who controlled South Mogadishu and parts of central Somalia, emerged as one of the most powerful figures in this anarchic period. While his forces were among those fighting for dominance, many Somalis still saw him as a nationalist who had liberated the country from tyranny. By 1992, the humanitarian crisis in Somalia had become a global concern. With hundreds of thousands dying from famine and war, the United Nations and the United States intervened militarily in December 1992 under Operation Restore Hope. The goal was to create a secure environment for humanitarian relief. Initially, Aidid cooperated with the UN, but tensions quickly arose when he felt that the intervention favored his rivals and ignored Somali sovereignty. In 1993, the UN launched UNOSOM-2, which aimed to disarm the militias and rebuild Somalia's state institutions. General Aidid viewed this as a threat to his power and accused the UN of becoming a neo-colonial force. The conflict between Aidid's forces and UN troops intensified, especially after a series of clashes in Mogadishu. On June 5, 1993, 24 Pakistani UN peacekeepers were ambushed and killed in Mogadishu by militias loyal to Aidid. This marked the turning point in the UN's mission. The United States, leading a coalition, declared Aidid an enemy and launched a manhunt to capture him. On October 3 to 4, 1993, the infamous Battle of Mogadishu took place. U.S. Army Rangers and Delta Force operatives attempted to capture Aidid's top lieutenants. The operation went wrong when 2 U.S. Black Hawk helicopters were shot down by Aidid's forces. In the ensuing battle, 18 American soldiers and hundreds of Somalis were killed. The event was later dramatized in the book and film Black Hawk Down. Though Aidid was not present during the battle, he emerged globally as a symbol of defiance against Western military intervention. After the incident, U.S. public opinion turned sharply against the Somalia mission. By early 1994, American and UN forces began withdrawing from the country. Aidid had effectively won the confrontation, but Somalia remained a broken state, and his own position remained contested. In the aftermath of the UN withdrawal, Aidid formed the Somali National Alliance (SNA), a coalition of militias, political allies, and technocrats. He declared himself the legitimate president of Somalia in 1995, though this was not recognized by the international community or most Somalis. His claim deepened Somalia's fragmentation and intensified rivalries with other warlords and political figures. Aidid continued to wage military and political battles to expand his control, especially in southern Somalia. He appointed ministers, established radio stations, and attempted to create an alternative government in Mogadishu. However, his influence was waning due to internal divisions within the SNA and growing war fatigue among the Somali population. On July 24, 1996, Aidid was wounded in a battle with rival warlord Ali Mahdi Mohammed's forces. Though the injury was not immediately fatal, complications during surgery led to his death on August 1, 1996, in Mogadishu. He was 62 years old. His funeral was attended by thousands of supporters, and he was buried in Mogadishu. His son, Hussein Mohamed Farrah Aidid, a U.S. Marine at the time, renounced his American citizenship and returned to Somalia to assume leadership of his father's faction. Aidid's death marked the end of an era in Somali politics. Though some of his followers continued to wield local power, the era of the major warlords was gradually eclipsed by new political actors, Islamist groups, and regional administrations. Mohamed Farrah Aidid remains one of the most controversial figures in Somali history. To some, he was a patriot, a freedom fighter who helped overthrow a brutal dictatorship and resisted foreign domination. To others, he was a warlord who contributed to Somalia's descent into anarchy, particularly through his battles for control of Mogadishu and his confrontation with the United Nations. Historians and analysts agree that Aidid was a highly intelligent, charismatic, and strategic leader. He understood both military and political power. He saw himself as a nationalist with a mission to unify and restore Somalia, but his actions often deepened divisions and prolonged conflict. His decision to confront the US and UN may have boosted his local image, but it also isolated Somalia from international support during a time of dire humanitarian need. His legacy is complex. He represents both the potential of post-colonial Somali leadership and the tragedy of lost opportunity. His life story is also a reminder of how foreign interventions, when misaligned with local dynamics, can turn liberation heroes into enemies. In Somali popular memory, Aidid's name continues to evoke strong emotions: pride, sorrow, anger, and nostalgia. Streets, schools, and even militia groups have been named in his honor. Whether viewed as a villain or a visionary, Mohamed Farrah Aidid's imprint on Somali history is undeniable.